Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Overreaction Monday show here on Orange Bloods Live. I'm Jeff Ketchum, joined, as always, on Mondays, because usually it's his time slot, like every day of the week, but I join him on Mondays. It's Anwar Richardson in the messy shirt, looking dope in the messy shirt. I like it. I like this just convergence that you've made to the game we all, well, not all of us.
I'm counting down to Arsenal. I'm counting down to Arsenal Man City on Saturday as that train wreck of a franchise continues to go off the rails. So yes, I'm fully converted.
Anwar's got feelings. We may talk about those before the show is over. Guys, like, comment, subscribe to the page, jump into the Specs chat. We do appreciate that. We love your super chats. We lead off today talking Texas football, because why wouldn't we? The Longhorns hosting an official visitor this weekend, yesterday, as a matter of fact. I guess he came in Saturday, stayed most of yesterday. Ohio State transfer defensive tackle Hero Kanu Anwar visits. I think it was his first visit since officially going into the portal on Friday. He is at Florida right now. There's some speculation that he may leave Gainesville and go straight to Texas A&M, but I think it is a sign that the Longhorns are very motivated to go into the portal market. In fact, I'm told that that's where the attention is right now, that I really get the sense that the retention quest kind of interrupted what they would have liked to have done, the aggressiveness they may have liked to have shown in the portal a couple of times, although maybe not. We heard as recent as last night some scoop from our guy Cody Carpentier, who was letting us know that there was talk, I guess, at the Senior Bowl. I wasn't quite sure where the hell Cody is, but he spoke with somebody last night that had mentioned that one of the targets that Texas had gone after early in the portal, they broke more than $1 million, and you know what I mean? Like, they're trying. It's not like they're not making offers. So as Kanu comes in this weekend at a major area of need, they definitely want to sign at least one or two more defensive tackles. Here we are. We lead off with the portal and whether or not in a battle against Florida and Texas A&M, and who knows who else might still be there. And I am fairly certain that this guy won't be a midterm guy. It's late January. I mean, he will have missed weeks of classes at this point, but most of the focus will be on guys that they would otherwise bring in the summer, guys that will bring spring portal guys. I'm told that they've got an idea of some names that might be out there, that there's constant evaluation. It'll be a big part of the rest of the offseason, Anwar.
Yeah. And I mean, look, if again, Kanu is not a guy that, is, if you look at the stats, you're going to say to yourself, like, oh, wow, like here you go. You've gotten yourself, this guy who, for sure is an instant impact guy. But look, when you're over 6 foot and 300 pounds, you play defensive tackle and you're at a major school and you go in the portal, you're going to get attention. Like, it just is what it is. Like, and, if you're that guy, who's kind of more, kind of a situational more role player at Ohio State. And, you're looking for, a couple of different things, which is, you want to increase your NFL profile, maybe get a couple more NIL dollars, whatever the case may be. Look, again, he didn't finish with a lot. Like, I think he was like 4 tackles he finished with last season, Catch, if I'm correct. Maybe a sack, something. I may have saw that in there, but at the end of the day, if you're Texas, you need bodies. At the end of the day, you need big bodies, you need big human beings, and you need guys who are willing to come in. And I think the key thing for Texas is and they've been careful about this, Catch. They don't want to overspend for somebody that is somewhat unproven. They don't want to, go crazy. Now, like, to your point, there may have been $1 million on the person that they were talking about previously, but that person was kind of like, okay, kind of legit, right? So, but if you're a Hero, hey, you get out there, you get a chance to get recruited, probably going to get some more NIL money than you can get. And if you're Texas, you got holes to fill in that defensive tackle position. And I, listen, I put something in the war room, I think it was last week, that, they feel pretty good about where they are from a defensive tackle position. That's what I'm told. But my lying guys tell me you better find some bodies and more of them at that position, because you may think you know what you have. And look, you've got to hope that a guy like Justice Terry comes along. But if you can put a guy like this in here and see what happens, Catch, if he just becomes a situational player, so be it. But you need as many bodies as possible.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I don't, they probably are fine, but fine's not the bar. And they know they're going to be, I think there's a good chance they're sitting at 75 scholarships coming out of the spring, which, even if they don't quite go that low, they might be sitting at 77, which would leave them in a position where they've got 8 spots to improve the roster in any number of ways that they want to. I think they still want, in an ideal world, I think they want to go get another defensive tackle or 2. I mean, last year they didn't really nail the portal in the sense that they got a big-time player. But all that volume of players that they signed actually worked out pretty well. That the Jermaine Lolays and the Bill Nortons, I mean, none of those guys, they actually fall into the category of the guys that Texas fans, I think, want to beat me up over whenever I talk about success for a prospect. I go with a non-subjective NFL drafted metric because there's no opinions on it. But there is this small category of players that are good players that don't end up getting drafted by NFL teams. I think that's probably where Lole and Norton fall into. Good players, they helped, but they weren't standouts. I think we were talking about baseball. I think they'd be replacement level players, but you got to be able to find the guys that can provide that. Canoe, I think, is a guy that probably fits into that category. They were surprised at Ohio State that he entered the portal, because as he gets ready to enter his junior season next year, there was a real sense that he was going to be a major contributor. Now, probably not a starter. I have not heard anybody at Ohio State say, whoa, he was going to start this year. We needed him. There was a sense, though, that this guy was maybe their number 3 D tackle, that after playing about 125 snaps this year, that number might double, maybe even go up a little bit more than that. So they were ready for him to take a step forward. Didn't want him to leave, kind of their version of Amari Niblack. I think you bring up an interesting point, Anwar. There's a big difference between probably the amount of money that they would give a guy like Pregnon, the offensive lineman that ends up going to Oregon, but was an all Big Ten player this year, would have, if he comes to Texas, that guy's an instant starter. Yeah. And you could probably justify a big NIL expenditure for that guy. You're buying a difference maker. I wonder what the market for a guy like Kanu looks like, because, I don't know that he's a starter for sure. He is probably competed against both Justice Terry and Travis Shaw, the North Carolina transfer that they've already brought in. So I wonder what that marketplace, I wonder what it looks like, because he didn't leave Texas committed. He goes to Florida. He may go to College Station from there. That, to me, sounds like a guy looking to, leverage all of this competition into the best NIL deal that he can find, along with potentially the best playing time. I don't know if either of those things are at Texas. Is Texas going to offer the most amount of money? Do they have the biggest need? Because I don't know that we could look at Kanu and say he absolutely shows up and starts over either Travis Shaw or, I don't know that Kanu's a nose tackle. I don't know that he's going to play over Brevard, the kid that transferred in from Purdue, but they've got that option as well. So he's definitely a rotation piece. How much they value what the cost of that is probably is impacted a little bit by, look, do we really want to spend $1 million on a guy if we think Justice Terry is going to be that dude? Is this guy getting in the way of Justice Terry? At the end of the day, Is he Tia Savea or is he Jermaine Lole, right? Which of these rotational guys, is he a guy that just sits the bench and we've wasted money? Or at the end of the year, if we pay this guy $750,000, we'll feel like, even though just a rotational piece, we got our money's worth. I think it's not cut and dry.
But the thing is, to add into that, right? The one of the they consider a key piece behind the scenes is a guy like Alex January. Yeah. That's the guy they're looking at this offseason from people I've spoken to in the building, and they're like, that's the guy when winter conditioning begins today. That's the guy they're wanting to step up. That's the guy that they want to take the strides. That's the guy that they're saying, okay, we can probably hang our hat on him so he can be the next in the line of good defensive interior tackles that we've had. And so, Catch, what you can't do is have the guy come in off the street making more money than the guy who's been in your program that you're trying to build up.
Yeah, but January's not that guy. Like,
he's not that guy, but neither is this guy.
Well, I would say they've had players at all positions in the last 2 years, young guys. Sarkisian's attitude has been, I ain't waiting on these young guys. Like, I'm bringing in guys. If they force their way onto the field, so be it. But, you know, they had volumes of players last year at defensive tackle. They brought back a lot of guys, but they didn't they didn't even really trust Broughton and Collins, guys that ended up fulfilling whatever faith was given because they had really good seasons. But, you know, I could argue that Alex January probably should have played more, but they leaned in on the experience of Lole and Norton. You look at the wide receiver position, you know, there have been times when young guys, and we've talked about this on shows in the past, that they've almost developed a reputation for, hey, man, do you really want to go there as a young receiver? Because Steve Sarkisian is about bringing in guys. They're going to come in and play right away. He ain't got time while trying to win a national championship to bring the kids along on a path that makes their development more important than the bottom line of the team. But I will say this. It's no accident that they were Hero Canu's first visit. So I don't know if there's a level of desperation. I'm not talking to people behind the scenes that are talking about this guy like he's life or death. And I've had nobody say, yeah, man, we think we're going to get that guy. I think he leaves town and there's a little bit of a shoulder shrug of, well, we'll see what happens. But he definitely didn't say, I'm coming to Texas. He definitely not only wants to explore Florida, which he's doing right now, but there's a sense he could go to College Station the very next day. So we'll see. But that Texas was his first visit means Texas got in on him as soon as his name was in the portal. We also know through the reporting of our peer in the media, Chip Brown, from the weekend, that they reportedly have interviewed an Ohio State assistant defensive line coach who might potentially come to Texas in the same position. It wouldn't be an upgrade. They've got no openings on their staff, but the NCAA has opened up the ability to have more on-staff coaching on the field than they have in the past. So Texas is looking to make a couple of additional hires to help in that capacity. Not guys that would be able to go on the road and recruiting, guys, though, that would be able to help in development at the same time. I poked around on that on where I know you were out of town for a few days. By the way, how was that? How was your couple of days off? How's mom?
Fantastic. You know, she's turned 76 this year. So it was great to see her, and she hadn't seen her grandson in about 2 years. So
she ate it up, didn't she?
Oh, she did. But you know, it's you know, they also did. There's more to it, but yeah, she ate it up. She loved it. She bought them things. But we were at an Embassy Suites, and the kids also spent a lot of time knocking on doors and running with their teammates. So like there was that portion of it as well. And then she was about to fight somebody when they heard them complaining about kids doing stuff. She's like, well, those are my grandkids doing it.
Hey, she hadn't unleashed one of those in 2 years.
Yeah.
She was, you know what she was? She was a woman looking to pick a fight. Say something about my grandkids so I can grandma it out. I'm glad that you guys had a good weekend. It just dawned on me when you said that, like, oh yeah, you're back in your house. Well, anyway, I don't even know if you'd seen it because you took a few days off.
I did keep up with it. Yes.
So I poked around on it, and I had a source basically say, with regards to the interview of the Ohio State defensive line coach, that Sark was probably going to talk to a few people and that shouldn't read into one candidate being interviewed as he's the candidate or that that's definitely going to happen. I had one guy, the same source, reached out to me today and said, basically commenting on Ohio State losing their defensive coordinator might change the dynamics with Ohio State in a number of different ways. That, if players had known, and this source told me, Nollis announced that he was going to Penn State a week almost after the national championship game is played to basically screw kids. He waited until after the deadline for guys to enter the portal. Defensive coordinators entering the portal or leaving is not like a head coach leaving. So you can't just say, okay, well, now I've got 30 days. So I was told that there are probably some hard feelings on that Ohio State roster with regards to how that unfolded, that guys asked questions about, hey, are you going to be back? Yes, no. So I think there were indications that he would come back, and then he left, and now players that made decisions in part because of who they thought. Anyway, keep an eye on Ohio State in the spring. They still obviously have to hire a defensive coordinator, but they also may be very urgent about retaining staff members given that they have lost their defensive coordinator and may lose a couple of guys on that staff who may follow him to Penn State as the world turns in college football.
This is the same guy that's being rumored to go to Oklahoma right after the season too, right?
Correct.
So, and that's what you and I talked about. They're like, well, there's probably something going on behind the scenes there where they're like, man, I mean, if you want to go, you can. Like there's something you just don't leave a job when you're at that pinnacle to go somewhere else unless
they're giving him $3 million.
I mean, that helps now. I mean, that definitely helps. But they would look if Sark and these guys, they take care of their guys too. Like, I don't know.
Coaches just love to feel that like they're wanted. And I think what happened there is, from what I've read, it just sounds like old boy got in his feelings a little bit, that maybe he doesn't quite get the credit, that maybe he's micromanaged by the head coach in ways that, like, he feels like, as one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, mind your business. Yeah. Maybe sometimes it's just time to move on. But it will be interesting to see should anything happen with that defensive line coach. My guess is he's in Hero Canu's ear, and that should that guy also bail, just something to keep an eye on. That there are no accidents in life. And at the time they would have allegedly been talking to an assistant line coach, Hero Canu's position coach at Ohio State. They're also talking to Canu, the player, and that they got first dibs when he visited this weekend. Just file it away. It was hard not to think of one thing when Canu shows up, and it's like, oh, well, if they went after and made a hire like that, or whoever they hire for this assistant defensive line coach, might there be somebody that follows from the portal who they've worked with at whatever school that they're working at right now in the spring? I'm told they are already incredibly active in scouting and evaluating and working the things that need to be worked on behind the scenes in anticipation of what will be available in the spring. Canu, if nothing else, lets us know they want another defensive tackle with the recruitment of Pregnon. And I think the dollar amount that was likely offered to him, we'll have more on this throughout the week. I want to dig around this and ask my own sources about this, but to hear from a third-party source not affiliated with either Oregon or Texas that Texas actually offered Pregnon more money than Oregon did, and he chose to go to Oregon for reasons that matter to him. Maybe just had a better connection with the coaching staff. I don't know. But I think it speaks to the thirst that Texas has. I was told when they missed out on Fasusi and at the back at the end of November, early December, as signing day was approaching, I was told, we got money to spend. We're going to be really aggressive in the portal. And then the brakes got slammed on that because everything that was happening in the portal started to impact retention. And suddenly every guy on the roster wants more money, and they had to figure that. And it really complicated getting frisky in the roster because, to the point that you made really about Alex January, how much money do you want to give Henry Canu when I think you make a great point? Alex January profiles just like Canu does. He played essentially the same number of snaps this year at Texas than Canu did at Ohio State. So they're not the same age. Canu's a little older, but from a playing time standpoint, you're talking about two guys that at their respective schools kind of project to be rotational pieces had they stayed put, and January has. You wouldn't want to bring Canu in before you've reached agreements with players and everything on campus. And if you were to give Canu a big amount of money, and a big amount of money could just be $500,000, that's probably a lot freaking more money than Bill Norton or Jermaine Lole got a year ago. And I guarantee you it's more money than Alex January was getting.
Oh. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you gotta make some business decisions. Like, if they're all things are equal, are we going to play 3 times the amount for a guy who's a junior going into his senior year versus a guy who's going to be like heading into his second year on campus? Like, I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just talking about if all things are equal, we shouldn't overspend for if they both are unproven. Why are we spending more for this unproven product than this unproven product?
It's all about timing and leverage. And, ultimately, a lot of these guys probably do need to enter the portal if they want to maximize their leverage. I mean, I don't know what Trevor Goosby's getting in NIL money, but I guarantee if he went into the portal, the level of urgency to retain him would change dramatically. It was like, what do you mean our left tackle is in the portal? What have we offered him? Are we skipping? Like, that guy can't go. It's about being willing. Look, say what you want to about Xavier Worthy. And by the way, congratulations. Our first, I guess he wasn't technically our first. Jordan Whittington was our first signed NIL deal, but it's hard to watch Xavier Worthy playing in the NFL and going to a Super Bowl and haunting the Buffalo Bills yesterday and not think back to when that kid, he was such a baby when he was first started doing our interviews, our NIL interviews that we did. And it's fascinating to just see him all grown up in his early 20s. But congratulations to Xavier Worthy. Should be a fun Super Bowl. I think Chiefs Eagles will be a lot of fun. It will be a former Longhorns winning a Super Bowl ring, though. It's either going to be Xavier Worthy and Charles Omenihu, who, by the way, off-field issues aside, and it's hard not to at least acknowledge that our boy Charles was in trouble for some really not cool things, but he's turned into quite a player for the Chiefs. He's a good NFL player. And Moro Ajomo for the Eagles. Somebody's winning a Super Bowl ring. Apologies to Moro. I think I'm rooting for X to get his first ring, if for no other reason than I would love to see his mom's social media. I would love to see her Twitter page after Xavier Worthy were to win a Super Bowl ring.
And the other thing, too, on that catch, what also struck me when I was watching the game yesterday, I couldn't help but thinking that Buffalo traded with Kansas City when they had that position of need and they needed a receiver, and they literally traded with someone that I was like, at the time, I'm like, you're going to play them in the championship game. And you're going to, and you're literally, and everybody in the world knew Kansas City is about to draft Xavier Worthy. They're like, yeah, go ahead and get another a weapon. That won't come back to haunt us within the next few months.
I mean, if Xavier Worthy's not on the Chiefs, the Bills win that game last night.
Yes.
I mean, the margins were so thin that taking the guy that had 100+ all-purpose yards and a touchdown reception and set up another with a great. It's funny, all Longhorn fans would say, Xavier doesn't fight for the ball hard enough. And he fought for the ball hard yesterday. I know that.
Boy, and I mean, never mind. I won't do it today.
Well, I bring that up is because, look, Xavier was known as a guy that would push the limits, and he almost went into the portal. You know, I know at one point, they thought they had an NIL agreement with Xavier, and he entered the portal anyway because of influences off the field that were like, nah, man, we're testing. And he got more out of it. Like, I think we were to talk to agents and his mom and representation, they would say, well, yeah, man, they probably didn't like our methods, but did our methods work? Yeah, they did. So as I watched Xavier Worthy last night, I'm thinking about this exact situation with Canoe and some of the other players. Like, sometimes drastic measures are needed to maximize what you're trying to attempt to gain.
By the way, one last thing on Xavier for like the criticisms that he faced and this and that. The one thing the thing you said that always stuck with me was like Xavier does the hard part, which is to get open. And it's amazing what happens when Xavier has a quarterback who can get him the ball when he's open. And that's what the Chiefs saw. They're like, shit, he's got 10 yards of separation. Well, Patrick Mahomes can find the ball and get him the ball. And needless to say, we don't see Xavier. We don't talk about drops or things like that. Like, we just see him in motion. And when he's open, the ball is right there. He catches it in stride, and it's like an instant 15, 20 yards. And then he finishes off tough, too. Just throwing that out.
He's just now really starting. It's the one thing I kind of noticed about Kansas City receivers. The young ones, it takes a while. But then this was kind of true of Rashee Rice a year ago, where you're like, oh, Rashee Rice, man. Because I had him on my fantasy team back when I played fantasy. And I drafted him as a keeper. And he would have been my keeper this year, and that would have been a waste. But you can see towards the end of the season, it's starting to come together. And Xavier Worthy looked like a different weapon last night. And I think it speaks to what he'll be in future seasons. Watch out next year. Like, Xavier Worthy could be a 1,300-yard receiver for the Chiefs next year, now that he and Mahomes really seem to have some chemistry, and he's really developed into a go-to guy that will only God, they're going for a three-peat. It's unbelievable. That was such good football last night. I'm really looking forward to the Super Bowl.
We got what, Moro Ojomo on the other side, though, right?
Yeah, and Moro plays like he is kind of what Texas is looking for right now, but on the NFL side, he's not. Mm-hmm. It's not Jalen Carter. He's not one of Philadelphia's most well-known, most talked about defensive line pieces. But man, he's on the field a lot. Other than Xavier, he is every bit as integral to what they do as what Charles Omenihu is to the Chiefs. So the Longhorns will have three guys in that game. And shout out to Sam Cosmi, who plays for the Commanders, although injured, tore his ACL in these playoffs. Had Washington won and beaten the Eagles, he would have had an opportunity to win a Super Bowl ring, even if he wouldn't have been able to play in the game. Buffalo has no Longhorns. Maybe if they drafted Xavier Worthy and not traded back, they'd be in the Super Bowl right now, and the Chiefs would be sitting at home for the first time in a few years.
Just a quick sidebar for a second. As I watched the broadcast yesterday, I felt like Tony Romo didn't know what the hell he was talking about half of the time. It was so weird. Like, sometimes, like, he questioned like a decision by like the Bills quarterback at one point, and then but he didn't realize that he had saw something on the field, and that was the reason why he had made the throwaway. And then I even towards the end, he said something how it wasn't going to be a lot of pressure coming, but then Kansas City brought that blitz with the cornerback. Like, I felt like as I watched it all through the game, it was the first time I felt like, Tony, I don't think you know what the hell you're talking about. Like, I don't know what script they gave you when you started, but man, I felt he was kind of lost a lot. I just felt like he was just going, I don't know. It didn't seem it wasn't good. Anyway, it was a quick sidebar. I thought Tony Romo was surprisingly not great at the broadcast.
Anwar, there's discussion. I have not heard this today. So this is new to me.
I mean, the rumor, here's the thing. Rumor, your friends in your group chat are saying it. Some obscure website is saying it. Like, is it Pete Thamel saying it? Like, there's this whole like rumors thing. I just want to know, like, where's the rumor? I want to let me look on this because I want to know where is there a source of this rumor, or we're just talking about, yo, me and my boys were thinking, hey, wouldn't that be cool if they went and did this?
We'll see. I would tell Texas fans not to worry. If they need to get Pete Kwiatkowski more money, they'll give him more money. The one thing Texas never likes to do is to be the first to do something. And even in this new era where the Kevin L types of the world are uber aggressive and they're not going to be told no and they're going to do what it takes. And that's not always the attitude that Texas administration has had. They don't necessarily like to be the trendsetter. So Penn State giving Nollis $3 million a year means a new bar has been set. And like Texas usually doesn't have a problem flying right at the bar. They don't ever want to be like, oh my God, Texas paid Kwiatkowski $4 million a year. That's never been done before. They don't like being that guy. They don't want to break records. But if someone breaks a record, okay, well, a new norm has been established. And you can look at the way Sarkisian is being paid. Like, what did they do? They didn't give him more money than Kirby Smart. They were like, you know what? We're going to bump you right up to the Kirby Smart territory. And if we need to renegotiate because the marketplace changes and you need more years or a little bit more money, we'll do that in the future. But they always like to bump their head right up against the ceiling. They never really like to crash through it. And I think that's probably true in NIL. The fact that the market is now the market means that they've got to play in the market. They can't play by last year's rules, which I think they really, really liked. They loved their NIL setup. And it kind of has come crashing down in the last couple of months. And they've had to adjust on the fly with regards to the other thing is, like, Kwiatkowski legitimately has a couple of players right now who are within a few $100,000 of making as much money as him. So
can I say the other thing though, Catch? Can I say the quiet part out loud?
Sure, I love that.
If Ohio State offered Pete K, I honestly believe Sark would say, cool, Johnny Nanson's now my defensive coordinator.
That is the elephant in the room.
Right. Johnny Nansen is loved behind the scenes. Like, and this is no disrespect to Pete K. I don't want any Pete K people calling me, texting me after the show, but Nansen is loved behind the scenes. And I think, I'm not saying Sark doesn't have a love for Pete K or loyalty or this and that. But if he's like, hey, man, you're going to get paid more money at Ohio State, man, it's been a good run. But man,
I think it's like this. If they were on the Titanic, Anwar, and Sark had one of those private little boats that the rich people got on. Yeah. So Sark's on the boat, and there's room for one more person on the boat. And he's got to choose between Kwiatkowski and Nansen. Who gets to be on the boat and who drowns on the Titanic? I think he's getting Johnny Nansen on the boat.
I think it's Nansen too. I think Pete's back in there listening to the band.
He's like, oh well, might as well play my violin.
He's eating his steak. He's just enjoying his meal. He's like, well, I guess I'm about to die because I know Jeff Banks is on that boat. I know Banks is on the boat. I know Nansen's on the boat. Here I am sitting by myself.
But it also makes sense if you're Ohio State. Look, it's flattering if you're Texas that the defending national champions are looking for a defensive coordinator. I mean, if you've got good people, that's what it's like to be successful. It's why it shouldn't have shocked anybody that Steve Sarkisian had NFL interest. When you have success, people pay attention. It makes you more valuable. It makes you. He just is coming off of a massive season. I wouldn't worry about it, people, for a couple of different reasons. And I think the biggest is if they lost Pete Kwiatkowski, I mean, it's beyond obvious what would happen next. That Johnny Nansen would become the Texas defensive coordinator. Nobody would feel like that was nepotism or boys looking out for each other. Texas has a guy in Nansen who is widely regarded as that's a guy who's
a badass at what he does.
A year ago.
He's a badass at what he does.
Yeah, and so I'm not telling you that no big deal. Kwiatkowski goes to Ohio State because I don't think that's going to happen. But if it did, I mean, it's pretty obvious what would happen. And I think that when Nansen was hired, you got to remember context. Nansen was hired in a year where the Tech coming off, Kwiatkowski's defense a year ago was seen as the reason why Texas didn't make it to a national championship game. The inability to make plays on defense when the season was on the line, specifically against Washington. But you think back to the Oklahoma game when Texas takes the lead, but then they can't stop Oklahoma. So when they hired Nansen a year ago, the thought process was, well, man, Pete better have a good year. That defensive, that secondary better not rank in the 120s this year. Or like Sark's got a guy lined up. And, the question will be how long ultimately they're able to keep a guy like Johnny Nansen around as a position coach. There may be some sliding doors on this where he'll never be the Texas defensive coordinator because Kwiatkowski will stay put. And at some point, Nansen's a thirsty guy. He wants to continue to climb the job ladder. He doesn't want to just be a position coach who's the number 2 somewhere, and not even a number 2 from a coordinator sense, which he's been, a number 2 on the defensive line or defensive staff pecking order is, less than ideal. So I'll tell you what, as what Anwar and I have just done in terms of conversation is about as much thought as I'm going to put in to this until I have a reason to put more thought into it. Like I would just say, and look, maybe I'm jinxing it because I'll dismiss what's in the chat. And then like 10 minutes later, Thamel or somebody will say, Pete Kwiatkowski has emerged as a candidate. Okay, if that happens, okay. But again, guys, it ain't rocket science with regards to what would happen if something did happen. So chill out. I wouldn't be concerned. I'd be more concerned about Hero Canoe and what's happening in his recruitment right now, more so than I would be with Pete Kwiatkowski. And I can tell you, in talking to people behind the scenes last night, they were like, don't really have a vibe on Canoe. They didn't sound like they were breaking their necks. Clearly they're interested, but maybe not like desperation interested. And maybe desperation in the portal is what gets things done. We'll see.
Absolutely. So, Catch, are we still Canoe, or you want to talk about something else?
Well, I was just about to say, like, I feel like, yeah, I think it's time to move on.
Well, what are your thoughts? To Texas, 17 days ago, they had the season finale for them against in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State that we're just talking about. Today's the first day of winter conditioning. Like, it's crazy to think how quickly we are at this point. But literally, we've started back football 2.5 weeks later, Cass. Like, we literally, and everyone's talked about, the Arch Manning era, so on and so forth. And, but we don't have to necessarily go with that theme today. But Texas football, the Texas guys are going to be meeting. They're going to start weightlifting, conditioning, doing field drills, implementing plays, and, getting guys ready for spring football, which that will be around the corner. We're going to be in February by the end of the weekends, Catch. It's like, it's crazy how this thing is just 24/7 now.
It's the NFL. And I think what's really interesting about the NFL is that the offseason is usually more entertaining, unless you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan or an Eagles fan or a Bills fan. What happens in the offseason? Who do you add in free agency? And what do you do in the draft? And look, I get it, man. I'm the same way. Whenever we get into – now, look, I enjoy Liverpool's season more than I enjoy like the transfer windows, but I love the transfer windows. As a fan, I will wake up every morning when I have to take one of those old man pee breaks, like 4 o'clock in the morning. It's like, okay, well, it's 10 a.m. in England. I got to look and see, did something happen today? And usually like 3 or 4 times a summer, something will happen. It's like, oh, I'm so glad that I did this. I'm so excited. I will say yesterday marked the 1-year anniversary of when I did that exact thing. I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, well, let me look and see if anything's happened across the pond. Oh, Jurgen Klopp is leaving Liverpool. Like that was a year ago yesterday. But in college football, this is, I think people are still adjusting to it. There is a sense of, oh no, I don't want it to be like the NFL. I like the way it was. But there's also a sense that everybody loves recruiting. They love signing day. They love the portal. They love talent acquisition. They love the rush of it's like going to Vegas and hopping on a blackjack table. And that first hand, it's like, I'll put 25 and you win. And you're like, oh, yes, yes. And I think that's what all of these situations are. The staff and the team behind the scenes, the team is working out. Preparations begin. And the crazy thing is how short the offseason is. It's about 6 weeks, maybe even less than that, because we'll see when spring football starts. But, you know, they'll go 5 or 6 weeks of an offseason. And I think people think it's like 6 months of bodybuilding and working out. And no, it's like 6 weeks. And then they get into pads and they go through spring football. And then by the time that's over with, it's mid to late April. There's no like, well, now we go back into no, now you're getting ready for finals. Then you take a couple of weeks off. And then there's like all of summer conditioning and working out and team building, which the coaches can be a part of. And I thought your note about the school and the program potentially moving more towards an NFL system of OTAs and maybe changing the way the offseason is built. I'm curious to see what that looks like. If you were to ask an NFL team, Anwar, so put your NFL Hall of Fame voter hat back on for a second, okay? If you were talking to John Gruden and you said, Coach, you could have a series of 3 weekends of OTAs during the season or off season, right? They'll have one in right after the draft in April, and then they'll have one in May, and then they'll have one in June, and you know, they're voluntary, whatever. Would you rather have that, or would you rather have a complete month where you have 15 practices and they're spread out like every other day, but you're going to get a month of like intense workouts? Or would you prefer to go keep it the way that it is, where for 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 times during the off season, you're going to be able to do this with the team? What do you think he would choose? What do you think they would view as the best way to shape an off season for what you want to do during the season?
It's always been less is more as far as the NFL is concerned. The hard part, though, Catch, by the time you get to the NFL, you know how to tackle, right? Yeah. I mean, you know how to bring guys down to the ground, so we don't have to go through that drill a ton with you. You got these guys coming out of high school, dude. Like, we know what it looks like. Just we talk about this, you know, these DBs from last year. Think about the DBs the previous year. I mean, the tackling was just atrocious. That's the one thing that made that defense so good last season, Catch, is that the tackling was so good. Like, you know, they brought down guys down to the ground. So It's interesting in the NFL. They don't hitting is not a thing. Like you tackling to the ground, like are you crazy? Like sometimes on occasions, but not too much. Like because now you mess with my money if you're trying to do all that. Like now I don't like all that kind of stuff. So
but I wonder, like, God, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because a third of the roster is comprised of true freshmen, right? 25 freshmen in this signing class. You know, most of those guys are on campus. So not quite 1/3, but greater than 1/4 of the roster will be true freshmen. And if it were all an older team, maybe you could treat them like veterans.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it's hard to ask Justice Terry to be a first-year contributor and then not give him all of the training that probably goes around. Because I will say that by the time you get to the start of the season, I think about these freshmen. I'm like, well, look, 15 days of practice in August, 15 in the spring, plus three days of practice the first week of the game week. So by the time a true freshman sees his first game, when Justice Terry goes to Ohio State, he'll have had legitimately 33 practices. And that doesn't include all of the offseason work, all of what they'll do in summer conditioning, working with position coaches, those types of things. So he's almost not a true freshman in the sense that we used to think about him. What Justice Terry will enter the season with, from you would think a development, coaching, comfort standpoint, is wildly different than what I think a guy like Nick Townsend will. He's not coming in until after the spring, during the summer. Those spring workouts and that conditioning, I really think acclimate freshmen so much better than otherwise. I almost look at guys that don't come in early as long shots to be big contributors. Although Kelvin Banks proved that sometimes you can just show up and be the starter at left tackle no matter what.
Yes.
That dude rolled up in August and was like, put me in, coach. I've got left tackle on lockdown. But I wonder if we'll ever see that again in the Sarkisian era. Because the roster is just different now. You know what I mean? Like in 2022, it was like, well, we're going to start 3 true freshmen on the offensive line, and that's just the way we're going to grow up, and it'll be fine. We'll pay our dues. And Sark's just not about that. Let's have 18-year-olds on the field if we could have a 22-year-old anymore. And I'm curious to see. You know, the thing they'll have going in their favor at receiver that's different in the past is that a year ago they would have had Bond and Golden already on campus participating in spring practices. And those guys jumped in front of the line working with the first team pretty quickly. Bond was working with the second team a lot during the spring, but Golden was like working with the starters pretty early. In fact, it's funny to look back on now, but I've mentioned this to you before. When you would report in the war rooms that the guy that Ewers has the best connection with is Matthew Golden, I remember thinking, well, that'll change.
Oh, it was no way. It was Jonte Cook is going to be the guy anyway. So like what, it was almost like it's blasphemous. That thing that was saying.
No, people poo-pooed on that significantly. And I remember early in the season, I think the Michigan game was when it first sunk in, when Ewers goes to Golden in the red zone a couple of times. And like he loved throwing those deep outs, short and intermediate outs. He loved throwing those to Golden because Golden will go up and get them. And I remember thinking, oh, this is what Anwar meant. And then as the season went along and it was like, oh, Matthew Golden is – I've seen 2 mock drafts that have Matthew Golden going in the top 20 of the first round just this weekend.
Jeez.
So, I bring all of that up because Jamie French and Kalik Lockett and Dalen McCutcheon are all on campus right now. So when they go into the spring – the Longhorns will not have gone into the portal and taken anybody yet that will take their spring reps. So for the first time, I guess, since 2021, Texas will go into a season where they haven't emphasized a portal addition early and having that guy come in early. Adonai Mitchell 2 years ago, again, Bond, and they brought in Silas Bolden. He just wasn't here in the spring. Otherwise, it would have been an even more crowded wide receiver room. It'll be interesting to see how good those freshmen. Sark will make up his mind, I think, about what to do in the spring. Do I need a starter? Do I just need a veteran guy? He'll give those freshmen, almost by accident, every opportunity to prove to me I don't need to go find another Isaiah Bond because I've got Khalil Lockett and he starts this year. Or he's going to say those guys didn't do enough in the spring, and you know what I need? 2 more wide receivers, and then we'll see what happens in the spring. I get a sense, God, every school in the country is going to enter the spring below the 85-man number for the most part. A lot of them are still going to have a lot of money to spend. They all have holes and needs. I think the tampering from now until April is going to be the wildest it's been since the portal era. Because the talent didn't enter the portal during the winter. But all of these guys are going to go through the spring. They're going to be like, oh, did I get starters reps or not? Did I get my money or did I not? They're going to have their agents talking. It's just going to be wild. Everybody needs to prepare themselves for it. And I don't want to be the kid who's cried wolf too many times because I thought the winter would be that way. But the one thing that you knew is that teams internally now had $15 million. Every major program in the country had not NIL money, but like its own revenue sharing money to commit to football. You could understand making a huge commitment to keep your best players. I actually think when we look at what happened in the portal, in the winter, it's highlighted by nothing but guys who really weren't the best guys at their position at the schools, other than a few quarterbacks. Everybody else, with the exception of just a few guys, are guys that it's a Micah Hudson, right? He's the top 25 prospect in the portal, but he hasn't proven anything. He wasn't even a starter where he was a year ago. I wonder if the spring is where we start to see cracks in the NIL foundation for some of these schools. It won't be players from the SEC, obviously, that Texas is poaching. So don't be shocked if you see Texas targeting Big 12 players and Big 10 players. And I think that process has already begun. And again, they're going to have a pretty massive opening. I mean, you either use those scholarship wisely and get guys that help, or you're left taking Velton Gardners late in the process. Like, hey, we need a running back. Could we have used a running back earlier? Yeah. Why didn't we get one? Didn't try. Why are we trying to get one now? Had an injury or two. Like, and the other thing is that I can't wait to watch Anwar. And look, I'll let this be my final thought on the show, and we can start to wrap up as we creep up on the 10 o'clock.
I got one more. I got one more thing for you after you get that done.
Shout out to Rogue Shop. Shit, man.
Yeah. There you go. Shout.
Well, he sent me this cartridge. I still have them. Like seeing is believing. I still have carts ready to go. Just on standby. Thank you, Richard. I love you guys so much. Look, man, go to rogueshop.com. Use that promo code OrangeBloods. Go shopping. Anxiety, pain, sleeplessness. My wife last night gave me a non-Rogue Shop product, Anwar. Instead of she's like, you know what? She bought like these strips that you put on your arm that's supposed to help you get a good night's sleep. Just give me the damn gummy.
Yeah.
You know what? Gummy has never failed me. I have never woken up after taking a gummy at night and been like, I didn't get a good night's sleep. I usually wake up feeling like a goddamn bear that's woken up out of hibernation. It's like, slept so good. Just go to the website, go shopping. They got stuff for your pets. They got stuff for your grandma, your mom, you. Find out what works for you, what you need, and then give it a shot. Because how many things in life genuinely improve your life? Rogue Shop has improved our lives, our quality of life. Don't wait another second. Use that website. Make it happen today. Okay, onward. My last thought on all of this was, Jesus, what was my last thought? Yeah, what was your thought? Remember?
Okay, so I have a question / observation / generalization. So I can't say I've done all the homework on what I'm about to say, but we can do it in live time though. I always hearken back to this story that I've told you many years ago when Texas had the Under the Lights camp. And I went out there and everybody was telling me, and I've read all these thick reports about how great Shane Buechele is. And I kept watching this other quarterback and I was so fixated on him. And I was like, that's the best quarterback out here. Who the hell is this guy? And I kept watching him and I followed him around. It's like after the end of the Under the Lights camp, it was a recruiting event where guys could come in on campus and work out. And I walked up to this guy because I just thought he was so freak. I thought he was better than everybody else that everybody was telling me I should keep an eye on. And I was like, hey, man, what is your name, man? And he's like, my name's Jalen Hurts. And I'm like, dude, I said, what's the deal? I said, is it how I was like, dude, I just want to tell you, I've just been covering the NFL for years. I just got here. I said, you're fantastic. I said, where's Texas' interest in you? He's like, well, they're not really recruiting me. I'd love to come, but I'm not hearing anything. I was like, so then I go and ask the staff about it. And they're like, yeah, nah, Buechele's the guy. I'm like, I don't know. I think this guy's legit. Anyway, fast forward, got Hurts, Mahomes. Now I'm going to bring this in here. We know how you feel about Quinn. And I'm bringing this all back to the rankings, right? It seems like when I was thumbing through the rankings, it seems like there are times with ranking the quarterbacks, it seems to be really hard for the evaluators for different reasons. I'm talking about the Rivals rankings more specifically because I can look at that class and, there's certain times, I'm looking at guys who are ranked ahead of other guys throughout the years, and you just see guys, you're like, we all know about Patrick Mahomes' ranking, right? But, DeAndre Francois was ranked ahead of Kyler Murray, right? I mean, I'm just, and I can go through every single year where I'm just like, what the hell? And I look at some of the 5 stars, sure, Bryce Young, that's fine. But then there's some others where you're just like, huh? And I'm just curious, is the quarterback position harder for the evaluators to rank than the other positions that are out there?
No, I don't think so. And I say that while acknowledging that I think there are a couple of things at play. First of all, let's start with like the important math on this. The quarterback position as a whole at the highest levels of recruiting hits in terms of you rank a guy as a 5-star, roughly 75-80% of those guys end up being drafted NFL players. If we look at guys, 5 stars from the state of Texas, historically, I mean, believe it or not, there wasn't a 5-star quarterback from Texas from 2010 through 2020, which is wild because it's a state that has been producing a lot of NFL quarterbacks. So when they do identify a guy as a 5-star guy, it's Vince Young. Rhett Bomar wasn't a huge hit, but Matt Stafford, Young and Stafford, both first-round picks. Stafford, first pick of the draft. Young, fifth pick in the draft. Ryan Mallett, 3rd-round pick. Garrett Gilbert was a bust, but still was a guy that got drafted and, started NFL games and got his NFL pension. Even a guy like Russell Shepard didn't even stick around at quarterback, still ends up being an NFL player. When you go to the tier below that, you're still talking about a hit rate that hovers between 40 and 50% historically if you're a super blue chip. So the guys that they're evaluating, they're putting these grades on, aren't hitting at rates that are alarming compared to the other areas. I think one of the things, though, that's happened, and it's one of my frustrations with the industry, is that the highest grades are often placed on the guys that make themselves most available. So if a quarterback is at all of the camps and he's going to the rivals camp and he's at the opening and he's doing, he's traveling and he's those guys get preferential treatment, I think, versus a guy like Jalen Hurts that didn't really play the game as much as some of his peers.
Like a Shea Patterson.
What's that?
Like a Shea Patterson, for instance, who gets a 5-star but then's undrafted.
Well, I just think that you'll often look at some of the high 3-star guys or low 4-star guys, and if you were to keep a spreadsheet, and I've done this before, and you go through the rankings and you put check marks from the number one player in the country down all the way to, quite honestly, the kind of tier of rankings. Because Jalen Hurts was a 4-star, but he was in that area of 4-stars that what's complicated is they don't hit at high rates. So you point at a guy like Jalen Hurts and you take 5 of him and 1 hits. So if you knew who the 1 was in advance, you rated him higher. But I think the real hole in the industry that the industry's got to catch up on is there's so much focus on the guys that you've seen the most that confirmation bias kicks in. I've always said one of the reasons I don't like to travel to a lot of games, and this will sound like an excuse to some, but I've thought about this in depth a lot, because you talk about, like, why do you miss on guys? I can remember going to a high school game and seeing Robert Griffin in a state playoff game play against, the little short running back that played for Oregon State and was really, really good. And I'm just drawing a blank right now. I remember it was cold outside. It was at the Palace on Palmer Lane. And it was like 40-mile-an-hour winds. There were extreme conditions. It was so cold. And there was a long halftime. It was like a 40-minute halftime at a playoff game. So I didn't stick around for the third and the fourth quarter. I watched the first half. And they both looked like shit. So I came away from that game emphasizing what I'd seen in person over on RG3 versus all other data points. Because what could be more important than what happened the day I saw him in person? And was the weather bad? Yeah, it sucked. Like, it sucked so bad I wanted the hell out of there. Was it windy and that might affect quarterback? Yeah. But sometimes as an evaluator, and this happens to coaches and it happens to people in the industry, man, when you make the effort to go see a guy, like, that becomes the body of evidence that stands out the most. Well, when you don't see a guy, so there's 2 ways this is problematic. One, you overemphasize the one. Look, think about Rivals with Kelvin Banks. They weren't wrong to take note of the struggles that he had at an All-America game in practice at a position that he had never practiced before. And look, I've said this before. I played both sides of the line in high school and never really thought it was a big deal moving from left to right. But not everybody is like that. It might be the difference between left-handed and right-handed for some people. You have to chalk that up. But Rivals evaluated Kelvin Banks. They had a million other data points. But what did they use? Well, the staff was all together, 3 consecutive days. You told yourself this really matters. And when he didn't practice great, they ignored everything else and leaned into, without knowing, this bias that didn't have to exist if you could remove yourself and say, whoa, 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 whoa. Are we doing the right thing? So it works against you in the evaluation process sometimes when you see guys in person. You use the wrong piece of evidence in your evaluation. And then there are times when because you don't see guys in person, you don't have that confirmation bias, so it works against them. Rankings in general lean in and rank higher the guys they've seen the most. And it's a problem. The thing is, though, that I have to confess is that when you look at the historical numbers, its problematic nature doesn't reveal an aha moment. It's like, why are all these high 3-star guys panning out at the same level of mid 4 stars? It doesn't quite work that way. There literally is these steps that go down that never stop. And I can't find a pattern that I could look at and say, I acknowledge there are problems, but as the evidence unrolls, a guy like Jalen Hurts is so much to the extreme of the exception rather than the rule that there's not a trend of Jalen Hurts's that I can point to and say, if they just stop doing that with all of these guys, they'll be better off for it. It's unfortunately, I haven't been able to find the thing that I could put my finger on that proves what you're talking about and thus allows us to say, this needs to absolutely change. Here's why. Jalen Hurts and the thing is, Jalen Hurts, for everything that we think about him from a recruit standpoint, he was still rated really high. It's not like he was a Rivals 250 kind of a guy.
But he got some of that love late after Alabama, though.
What's that?
He got some of that love late after that Alabama offer, though, right?
Well, I had him ranked as a top 25 prospect in the state the entire recruiting cycle. He was always kind of in that territory for me. I never ranked him as a super blue chip. I was wrong. I rated Jalen Milroe much higher than I did Jalen Hurts, and I got that wrong. Jalen Hurts has turned out to be better than Jalen Milroe, even if they're actually pretty similar. If you think about right up until Jalen Milroe's season at Oklahoma, they're actually kind of the same guy. And who knows? Milroe may end up being like a second-round draft pick when it's all said and done, or a second or third-round draft pick. And we may look at, well, you know what? Where he was ranked was probably really, really close to where he probably should have been ranked. The recruiting people will say, could we have had Jalen Hurts rated higher? Yes. Did we have Jalen Hurts rated high? I think they would say yes. It's just that if you're not ranked as a top 50 guy in the country, because this happened with Kelvin Banks, even though he was rated as one of the highest rated players at his position in the country and a guy that I would label as a super blue chip, even at his lowest ranking, it's like, well, he wasn't a 5-star. And thus it feels like there's a slight. And I will just confess that there are guys that I think are really good that I don't think are great that I have ranked really highly. And here Rivals had Jalen Milroe ranked as the number 231 player in the country. ESPN had him ranked outside their ESPN 300. 24/7 had him ranked as the number 104 overall prospect in the country. That's really high, but it wasn't high enough for a guy that was as good as he was in college. Everybody missed on him. How much they missed on, though, 24/7 had him ranked as the 18th best prospect in Texas. Rivals had him at number 31. If we were to do a re-ranking, that guy would be in the top 5 without looking at the rest of the class that he was in. He might be number 1. But I would still say that 24/7 didn't have him ranked low. They just didn't have him ranked high enough. And that's what happens sometimes. But I don't think of him as a guy. I mean, that's higher than what Shane Buechele was ranked. Like, let me look up what Shane Buechele ended up being ranked by all of the services. I know Rivals had Buechele ranked higher, but I don't think 24/7 did. And it's on some level, you know, it certainly wasn't a consensus. I know Buechele, ESPN didn't have Hurts ranked at all. So my guess is they would have had Buechele ranked higher than him. To be fair, let's see. ESPN had, 24/7. I stand corrected. 24/7 didn't have Shane Buechele ranked in their top 247. They had him ranked 45th in the state of Texas. So they had Hurts ranked much higher. ESPN had Buechele as the number 42 player in the state of Texas. Not far away, essentially a smidge higher than Rivals or than they did Jalen Hurts. Rivals is the one that got it wrong. They had Jalen Hurts ranked 31st in the state, and they had Buechele ranked 13th. And if I'm being completely honest, my ranking of both players was not exact to Rivals, but pretty close. I was wrong. But Buechele's in the NFL right now. He's drawing paychecks, but he's not Jalen Hurts.
But the other guys ranked ahead of him in that year: Shea Patterson, a 5-star, Malik Henry, Jarrett. I can't pronounce his last name. Khalil Tate, Buechele, Max Gilliam, Devon Modster, Zarek Cooper, and then he was at 231.
Yeah, but I'm telling you that 24/7 had him ranked as the number 1 quarterback in the country. They just rated him at 104 nationally.
It's weird, but okay.
So you'd have to talk to them about why they didn't have a quarterback ranked in the national top 100 that year. But I'm looking at their rankings. So I'm just saying, if we were to look at the composite, take all of it together, Hurts, if you merge 24/7 with Rivals and ESPN, On3 didn't exist at the time. To your point, some guy that signed with Tennessee named Jarrett Guartanio.
Thank you.
I don't know who the hell that is.
I don't know.
That long ago, he was the number 1 quarterback. Brandon McElwain went to South Carolina. He was number 2. Jalen Hurts was the consensus number 3 quarterback in the country. Buechele was number 4, which is wildly ironic considering you can literally go all the way back. Was that 2014 or 2015?
That's 2016.
Okay. But that was the class of 2016. I'm saying, was that the summer of 2015? Or was that even earlier?
Oh, when I saw him,
yeah,
it was summer 2015. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Going into his senior year.
Almost 10 years ago. You can walk this discussion back 10 years.
It's just interesting because you got Josh Allen. You had Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes in the Final Four. I mean, Josh Allen is a unicorn. I'll give you that, right? Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and we've always heard the Patrick Mahomes things. And so it's interesting that 3 of the 4, for where they were from like a ranking standpoint, and from the quarterback position specifically, where it should be, there's a lot of variables that go into, the quarterback has to have a lot of guys around.
I think Mahomes falls into the category of just wasn't evaluated enough.
Yeah.
Because look, sometimes guys show up and as soon as they're on campus, you're like, you need one day to go, oh shit. That guy's different.
Correct.
And then you ask yourself, well, why didn't I know that 6 months ago? And every situation is a little bit different, but sometimes it really is as easy as I saw this guy and paid attention to him, and I paid less attention to the other guy. Did Patrick Mahomes get scouted in his senior season in person by Rivals? I have no idea, but he was committed to Texas Tech. What would be Rivals' motivation to use its resources on a Friday night if you've got a state of Texas recruiting guy? Where are you going to emphasize that he go see a high 3-star that Is it Texas Tech? It only has a few thousand subscribers in the Rivals network. Or do you make sure that in this instance, if we go back to what was going on in the state of Texas in 2014, I think that would have been, is that a Solomon Thomas year? That's Myles Garrett. That's Tony Brown and Jamal Adams. And, you're probably going to, it's Gerard Hurd. I can remember Gerard, and Gerard Hurd's a perfect example. Man, Gerard Hurd probably got seen in person 3 times as a senior. Rivals probably had somebody at one of his games 3 times. So they fall in love with Gerard Hurd, and he's on a 2-time state championship team. And oh, by the way, if you go to Denton Guyer to see Gerard Hurd, you get to see 10 other guys who are going to be college players and who they're playing against. You might see more. If you were going out to see Patrick Mahomes in high school, you were going to see Patrick Mahomes. And what was your motivation? And I think you can extend that all across the country. There just would have been a lack of motivation to have a great, not a good, but a great evaluation on what happens is you see a guy like Mahomes once, you deem that he's a high 3-star, and then you make that decision. You've said, I've watched his film. I've seen him in person. Mine's made up. And what it doesn't often allow for, and I don't know that Mahomes technically falls into this. I just want to know this. When Mahomes showed up in Lubbock as a freshman, it was like, oh, that guy's got a special arm. When he got to Lubbock, we didn't know if he was any good. But it was like, that guy has the best arm of probably anybody in the Big 12 as a freshman. So why wasn't that identified? Because that's what we did with Quinn Ewers. People were like, his arm talent. Arm talent, arm talent, arm talent. We can't tell me that Mahomes' arm talent wouldn't have been as impressive as Ewers at the exact same time. The level of resources used to follow Ewers versus Mahomes was just wildly different. And I think they pay the price, both with him and Hurts, with regards to those evaluations.
No, And again, it's always good because, as we get into this season, and we can close with this, but we get into it, there's going to be the, we go into this, start going to the draft. There's going to be the star rankings, and, does it matter? Does it not matter as far as your star rankings are concerned? And you're always going to hear some of the guys who are the guys that, hindsight being what it is, Patrick Mahomes being ranked as the 12th best dual threat quarterback. I mean, Brandon Harris was ranked number 5th in the country at that point, and Brandon Harris now has a desk job, and Patrick Mahomes.
He likes his desk job, but he still has a desk job.
He's got a very good desk job, a very high-paying desk job, but he's ranked 5th in the country. Gerard Hurd, we don't know what he's doing, and the guy who is, that number 12 is going to be remembered as one of the best quarterbacks of all time. And so, like I said, when we had the conversation about Quinn this past season, and then I was watching games this weekend, it's just the rankings always kind of, I think about it, that more from an analytical standpoint, more so. And again, that's why
there are no guarantees though, Anwar. Like the thing that, even when I say 70-80% of guys get drafted, there are no guarantees. And it's a gamble no matter what. Even if it's a gamble where the math is slated in your favor, it still comes with risks. And, we can look at the super blue chips, the 5-stars, that Jonte Cook is a miss. And there would have been people that were convinced that there was no risk in bringing Jonte Cook. Certifiable NFL talent. He's going to make it. The data says that receivers at 5-star levels miss 50% of the time. So it's still a coin flip. And the thing that I think people don't understand is that sounds bad. Well, wait till you get down to a regular old 4-star like Jalen Hurts was ranked, and it's a 1 in 6 shot or a 1 in 5 shot. And then it's well, I don't even do that in Vegas. I don't put my money on a game where I'm 80% to lose. It's well, that is basically as good as it gets in college football recruiting, unless And look, this is going to be at the center of what Chad and I talk about. So, Chad, if you're watching, I know we haven't talked yet. I'll call you in like 5 minutes. Texas has caught Ohio State in terms of elite recruiting talent on campus. Now, it's not, the numbers aren't final, but a year ago, they were still, they're like Georgia and Ohio State had basically 1.5 times the number of elite prospects and recruits and portal guys that have been brought in as Texas. Going into the next season, Texas is only trailing Georgia. And it is freaking amazing at what Steve Sarkisian has done to the roster in essentially 2.5 years, 3 years, to change the roster in a way where it wasn't even middle of the pack amongst national powers. It was on the wrong end of that, to now being ahead of Ohio State, which was number 1 in the country last year, and it's no accident why they won a national championship. That roster has finally arrived where the only thing that you can say about it is it might not quite be as good as Georgia's, but they have a major edge at quarterback. Like, there's no reason why moving forward every single year Texas shouldn't be competing for national championships. The talent pool says they should.
Well, the goal this offseason is to get to that Ohio State, Georgia level, especially from a physical standpoint. So that'll be really good information for you to dive into. I know you got to run, so I'll let you get out of here for the noon show.
Yeah, guys, make sure you go to Rogue Shop, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We do appreciate all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Overreaction Monday show brought to you by RogueShop.com. I'm Jeff. He's Anwar. He'll be back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I'll be back in an hour and a half with House Divided. It's Orange Buzz Live. The content never stops. We'll see you soon. Later.